I want to bring on our panel of web speakers as well as our moderator for this session, Carol Bolger. So please look forward to the session. Have a great time, and I'll see you all throughout the event.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this discussion about JavaScript. And I'm Carol. I'm an organizer with the GDG SunCoast, which is located in Tampa Bay, Florida. I'm also a mentor for the Southeast region of the GDG. So let's start with the panel introducing themselves. So Valerie, you want to start?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Valerie Phoenix. I am an engineering manager at a mental health startup. And on top of that, I run a nonprofit called Tech by Choice, and we help underrepresented groups understand, thrive in tech. And I'm excited to be here.
That's great. And Tracy?
Hi everyone, my name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet, and I am organizer of GDG Triangle, which is in Raleigh, North Carolina, also GDG Silicon Valley too. So I love seeing DevFest happening right now. I'm also a Google developer expert for Angular on the RxJS core team and CEO of a company called This Labs.
Oh, awesome. And Shaundai.
Hi everyone, I'm Shaundai Person. You can find me on Twitter at Shaundai. I am like Beyonce. I have my first name as my handle. I'm a senior software engineer at Netflix, the UI engineer on the productivity engineering team that I work on. I'm also an organizer for React Robins, which is a community for women and non-binary folk who are JavaScript and React enthusiasts and hobbyists and employees. Glad to be here.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. So the first question I have is, what are some aspects of maintainable code? So Tracy?
Sure. I would say definitely some aspects of maintainable code would be things like using a linter, prettier. I feel like before prettier came out, we were all lost. And, I would also say like in larger teams, right? Like the arguments and people, saying like, no, it should be single spaces, double spaces, and making like PR changes for no reason, and kind of there being contention all the time. To make things just generally more maintainable, like having a team agree upon like a preset set of standards and running that. Also, team processes are a really great way to make sure that there is good maintainable code so that everybody's on the same page and understands what's going on. And then, of course, good test coverage is definitely something that I would recommend.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Valerie?
Yeah, I think for maintainable code, it's something that I actually struggle a lot with is finding good names for your functions and your variables. I think that's one very easy way to make sure that you're keeping a good track record of what's going on in your code and explaining what's supposed to happen without having to rely so much on documentations or comments. I think another thing that we can always do to make sure that our code is maintainable is when we're thinking about creating, whether there be functions or their components, we really want to simplify our code and make sure that as much as we can, that the code is doing one simple thing, especially inside of a function, versus multiple things. Like it's really hard to track and keep up to date and things like that. So those are just a couple of tips I have for creating maintainable code.
Great, thanks. That's so true. Shaundai, you have anything to add?
Yeah, Valerie, that was a good point. That was kind of what I was going to say with the simplified functions, but just making sure that your code is composable. And for those who aren't familiar, it just basically means what Valerie said is where your functions are only doing one thing. You have very clear, defined, if you're using components, you have very clear components that are only responsible for one thing. There was a really good talk by Rich Hickey, I think back in 2011, called Simple Made Easy, where he uses the analogy of building a castle. And there's the option of a Lego castle or a knitted castle. And if you had to refactor it or restructure it, if it was a castle, would it be easier to refactor the one that's the Lego castle or the knitted castle? And so code that's not composable is much like the knitted castle, where all of the different functionality is intertwined. It not only makes it hard for you to onboard with new code, like if you're new to the code base, to be able to understand what's there. But then when it comes time to making changes, making one change unravels a whole bunch of other stuff. And then on top of that, it's really hard to test functions that do too many things. Where if you have a Lego castle where things are just really strong, they're meant to fit with another piece of the software, it's really easy to take things apart, put things back together, onboard into new code bases, work with and collaborate with other engineers. And then the company that I was at before I was at Netflix, we did a series of acquisitions while I was an engineer there. And part of those acquisitions were acquiring the code base. And we had to integrate with code bases that had never had any concept of the code base that we were working with. So having composable code allows you to just kind of be the edge of that Lego block where another code base can just kind of fit right in and connect with you. And it makes mergers and acquisitions and all that good stuff a lot easier.
That's great. Thanks. I like that analogy with the Legos and the knitting. That's really good. Thanks. Okay. And now the next question, what are some common mistakes that you see people make in JavaScript? Valerie, you want to start this one?
Yeah, so some of the common mistakes that I see happen, especially for folks who are just starting a team or like maybe new to development, is we tend to spend a lot of time on Googling. And so while this is not like a JavaScript type issue, I think this is something that I like to share with a lot of devs. When we go into these rabbit holes of like, I have to find this answer, I have to do this on my own, we want to really remember that coding is a team effort. And so some of the tips that I like to share with people, no matter what problem you're trying to solve, is make sure that you set a timer. Being able to set a timer will help you understand how much you're progressing with what you're learning, and it's easier to track. And then it also makes sure that you put yourself in a position where you are making sure you ask for help at the right time, and you're not going to hold on to those problems and those bugs that other people can help you out with. And overall, when you do stuff like this, you're going to be able to be a better teammate and make sure that you are able to close out your tickets a lot faster.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's something all developers could learn from, to ask for help, surely. Okay, and Tracy?
Sure. I would say abstracting too many things away to where it's like impossible to find something would definitely be a good mistake. I think, we as developers get really excited about like new things, new code, doing things amazingly. And it's like, oh my God, look at this like really cool, like technical thing I did, but then I think also like as teams, just as Shaundai said, like it's a team effort when it comes to development. A lot of times you have to kind of take into consideration, like, are you building an inclusive code base? Like, are you coding inclusively so that everybody on your team can contribute and you're leaving room for junior developers, let's say, to contribute? I think that's something that we don't consider enough as an industry, but it's something that's really important to, again, like just make our, I think, not organization, but like our industry generally, like more inclusive, more attainable for people.
Great, thank you. Shaundai, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say not testing. And well, I know, Tracy, you mentioned this in the beginning, but it's a mistake in interviews, like when you're doing your coding exercises, that people leave out tests, even just like a couple simple tests to show that you know how to do testing. But testing is, everybody has kind of hate relationship with testing, except if you're Kitsy Dodds and you just like love it. But I have my own love hate with it because it sucks to do it because you want to just be coding and building and things like that. But at the same time, testing has saved my butt so many times. So I'm a big advocate for that. And I think, if your organization isn't really big on testing, you can really change the way that your organization evolves and grows, and how maintainable your software stays by making sure that you include tests. So be an advocate for it, and you never know, maybe you'll end up liking it. So I would say testing is a big thing. Another thing too is having regard for performance, like endless loops, really expensive API calls that aren't handled in the right way. It can lead to really bad performance issues. And when you're testing or when you're building locally, the experience that you have with like how fast things go, it's different from somebody who has really poor internet connection, who's trying to use your app and get something out of it. So really take performance into consideration. Google has a great tool called Lighthouse that will allow you it has like different metrics that help you to measure the performance of your app. So I would say run a Lighthouse report and run it under different scenarios, but Google will help to get you, or Lighthouse will help you to get a really good idea of the performance of your app, and as well as other different things like SEO, accessibility, and things like that. So I would say pay attention to performance and tests.
Yeah, great.
Oh
Thank
my
you.
God. Yeah, also do small plug. We just developed this thing called perfbuddy.com. So performance buddy, perfbuddy.com. And it kind of helps, I love Lighthouse. It's built on top of Lighthouse, but like it gives you a report that helps you understand like what your next action items could be and or selling that to your boss, which I think is really useful. Because, as developers, we know why performance is important, but like they don't usually care. How does this help me make money? But yeah, check it out. Check it out.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and what is a cool trick that you think everyone should know in JavaScript? Okay. Shaundai, you want to start this one?
Sure. So I have a couple of just cute little operators that I use. The nullish coalescing operator. I was actually talking with Danny Thompson later last night, and we were just kind of like riffing off of ideas, and the topic of nullish coalescing came up. So for those who don't know what nullish coalescing is, or don't know how to spell it because it's tricky, what it looks like, it's just two question marks next to each other. And so on the left-hand side is kind of your question. It's just your expression on the left-hand side. And if that expression is null or undefined, then we'll show whatever expression is on the right-hand side. So that one I use just kind of, it's just a way that I keep my code pretty. Like I'm a big advocate for just clean looking, pretty code. So that, and then I also like the logical and operator, which I think most people know about, but it's two ampersands, and I will use that instead of using ternaries. So a ternary, for those who don't know, is like, I'll have a question, like let's say is Shaundai truthy? And then I'll have a question mark, and then if true, this next expression will show, so true, and then a colon, and then whatever I want to show if it's false. Instead of using that, I would use the and operator and say Shaundai and whatever is true. And so if Shaundai is truthy, then we'll show the expression to the right of the and operator. And I like it. You can use either one. It really doesn't matter, but it's one small cute thing that I like in my code.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, Valerie?
Yeah, so when I saw this question, there are so many different things that run through my head about cool stuff with JavaScript and like the little tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. But one of the things that I've noticed is that I tend to try to find like the latest and greatest. And that's always not the most helpful. I found that the most impactful thing that I picked up with JavaScript over the last couple of years is just really fully understanding the array method and all that it could do. And I didn't really figure that out until I started interviewing for senior positions. And I realized, you know what, a lot of these questions I can learn how to answer much quickly for these coding challenges if I could figure out a little bit more about these array methods. So I know that there's a lot of cool stuff that I wanted to talk about, but I scratched that all out and just wanted to share, like, do a deep dive into those array methods. Make sure you feel really comfortable with those because they can really help you excel during your coding challenges.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. Thank you. And Tracy?
Mine, I'm so curious to see what everyone says in the comments, but a cool trick that everyone should know in JavaScript, TypeScript. I'm all about TypeScript. I feel like it helps us as developers, even when, for example, I'm on the ArcsJS core team, and when Ben was doing the refactoring from ArcsJS, from JavaScript to TypeScript, it's interesting because everything was working fine, right? But when he implemented TypeScript and changed things over, he found a lot of bugs that he would have never found if it wasn't for TypeScript. Again, I'm all about inclusivity in our industry and, helping junior developers and everything like that. And I think TypeScript really provides a lot of guardrails for people learning JavaScript to be more successful, right? Like better error messages, okay, when you're doing something wrong. So it helps create I think better standards for people to advance quicker.
Okay. Do you have a resource for people who want to start learning TypeScript?
Oh, there are so many resources. Does anybody else on the panel have a favorite? I mean, there's just...
I'm actually coming out with a course on TypeScript.
Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
Fabulous.
But if you want to learn it today, the course is not available. But what I have, and I'll show you, this is this book obviously sits right by me as I work. This one, and there's another one called Advanced JavaScript. So these O'Reilly books have been really helpful. I have read them from front to back, but now at this point, I just kind of use them as a reference guide, and I took some notes. But I am a big advocate for TypeScript obviously. So if you want to sign up for updates for my course, it's tsforjs.com, TS for JS. How I got on board with TypeScript was at my last company. I was part of a team that was refactoring our code base from very old Angular 1 to modern TypeScript and React. And I hated TypeScript because JavaScript is the first language I learned, and I was just YOLOing it up, let's just do it. Who cares what happens? Forget tests, forget everything. And I'm just living my life. And TypeScript is kind of like the parent, and it's telling you have to do things this way, or make sure that you take this edge case into consideration. So I told myself I was going to teach a course so that I would learn more about it. And
that's the best way to learn.
Absolutely.
Teach someone else.
Yeah. And now I love it. I'm just everything that you said, Tracy, it puts in these guardrails in place that help you to, even before you start declaring variables and identifying things, you're thinking of the bigger picture of your entire application and how different functions will fit together. You're identifying edge cases that, the way that you think about code is different once you start getting really good with TypeScript. You can identify edge cases that you wouldn't have ever thought about when you're just using a dynamically typed language like JavaScript. So anyway, that was my long answer to saying programming TypeScript is a good way. Is a good way to learn.
Great. Okay, and so what are some best practices that you can share that could help someone elevate their JavaScript abilities?
I would say learning to test. Yeah.
TypeScript. Sign up for Shaundai's course. What is it? It's tsforjs.com, right?
That's right. Yeah.
tsforjs.com.
forjs.com. Yes. You got it. So yeah, learn TypeScript, learn to test, take Kent C. Dodds has a really good course. And then also Scott Tolinsky, I think on his Level Up Tuts has a good course on Jest. If you want to learn React testing library, go to Kent's course. And Cypress. Yeah. So that's right. So yeah, if you're learning to test.
How could you not plug a local company, Shaundai? I'm kidding.
You're completely right.
But I think also to riff off what you were saying, Shaundai, I mean, you said this in the last one, which, you know, my comment is like, learn how to explain your code, right? And you said like, if you, you know, like you taught, which helped you learn better. But I think that's definitely something that you can do to elevate your JavaScript abilities. Just like write it down in a blog post, explain your code a little bit more, because that makes you a better developer generally as well.
Yeah, and I think thinking about talking about your code, another thing that's really good to help you level up in JavaScript is actually getting really good at code reviews. I feel like code reviews is one of those things that is just like, when you're first starting out, you don't know what to say, you don't know how to like really give feedback. But I noticed that when people start to grow in their skill set and really understand the code that they're working with, they'll be able to give like really great feedback or give different opinions about how code can go, but from a very encouraging and like loving way. And I feel like that is another way to get yourself, one, accustomed to a new code base, or maybe even just something you're interested in learning. And it sometimes feels less stressful than actually writing the code. So just getting good at reading code could also help you level up.
I would also say, and Shaundai, I think you brought this up actually when I asked you, like, I mean, not in this one, but like previously, that like, you know, open source is a great way to like level up your skills, learn what it's like to be on a real team, like learn new best practices, etc. And I always encourage people, like, if you ask maintainers, for example, like, what can we use help with, right? It's like, just do some code reviews. You don't have to be a senior developer to do a code review. Like Valerie said, like, it's a great way to like elevate your JavaScript ability. So even if you're a junior developer, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Even on teams, like, don't be afraid to. I remember when I was doing my first code review, I was like, I would like think I wanted to say something and then ask somebody if I could say it. And if they said it was okay and it didn't sound stupid, then I would post the comment, you know? So there's like ways to get around it, but that helps you build confidence and get better.
Yes, I love that.
That's great. Thank you.
Another thing that I wanted to add too, sorry, Carol,
go ahead.
Get comfortable talking to your customers. And a lot of engineers don't do this, but you try, like, if you can shadow a customer facing person, like a salesperson or customer success, it's great hearing those problems that they're going through straight from their mouths. And I'm a career switcher. I spent 12 years in sales before I moved over to engineering. And when I would have engineers come do like kind of ride-alongs with me, I would see so much, even if I didn't, like, I would see such a huge gap in between what the customer was saying and what the engineer was hearing as problems and priorities. So try to bridge that gap as much as you can by getting on calls with your customers, asking questions, talk to your, if you have like a user experience team that is responsible for doing customer interviews, try and hear from their voices, and it will open up your eyes to so much as an engineer.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. Like me coming from like a UX background, going into tech, like I would always ask, like, what's the research? What are people saying? Can I get some comments? Let me see what's going on. Major difference.
Yep. Yeah. I guess coming from them backgrounds actually was an advantage.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think it's always an advantage. I think people underestimate that. Like, if you're a junior developer out there and you're like, oh man, I'm just starting. It's like, man, you bring so much perspective. That is, you know, if you just look at technical skills, you know, maybe you're not valued in that way. But like, once you join a team, you'll see how valuable you are and like how much you bring to the table.
Absolutely.
All right, great. I have one last question here. So, what is a design principle that you use, and can you explain a little bit about it?
So it's not one, it's actually 10, but I'm not going to explain them all. You can look them up, but it's Jacob Nielsen's 10 heuristic principles for design, I think is the name of it. UX, UI. So I'm a front end engineer, and obviously UI, UX is very important as part of my role. But those 10 principles, it's based on research from interviews from, I forget, maybe 2,000 or 200 different customers. And he aggregated all of that research into 10 principles that it's something that you think about or may not have thought about, but he really encapsulates it really well in these heuristics. So it talks about things like making sure that your user understands the progress or the current state of things, like you have loading states or things like that, or prevent them from creating errors by putting guardrails in place and things like that. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, and just to kind of like piggyback off of you, like I think also thinking about design from a accessibility standpoint is also amazing too. Just making sure that when you're building something, even with JavaScript, you're building it so that as many people as possible can use it.
All right. Hey,
Thank you so much for this panel session. I think you guys were beyond incredible. The chat was going wild. You gave some great insight. I have to also agree with Tracy. I'm a huge TypeScript fan, so love that tip that she shared there. Shaundai knows I'm a Knowledge Coalescing fan as well. Thank you so much for the insight that you dropped.